the United States completed its withdrawal from Afghanistan, ending a hasty and humiliating exit for Washington and its NATO allies. More than 123,000 people have been airlifted out of Afghanistan since the fall of Kabul. Following 20 years of military intervention, the last US military flight took off from Hamid Karzai International Airport 1 minute before midnight, Kabul time. The Taliban opened celebratory gunfire across Kabul, and a spokesman congratulated Afghans on their victory from the runway. Thousands of Afghans who helped Western nations during the war have been evacuated. But those who are left behind are staring at an uncertain future. In the last 20 years, the war has taken the lives of nearly 2,500 US troops and an estimated 240,000 Afghans. More than 550,000 people have been displaced. According to the United Nations, 18 million plus people, over half of Afghanistan's population, require aid and assistance. The conflict has ravaged Afghanistan, and the economy is on the brink of collapse. But there is one country that is eyeing opportunities amid the current crisis. The People's Republic of China.
The withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan shows that the policy of wanton military intervention in other countries and imposing one's own values and social systems on others is impractical and is bound to end in failure. Afghanistan has been able to free itself of foreign military occupation. The Afghan people have ushered in a new beginning for national peace and reconstruction, and the history of Afghanistan has turned a new page.
After the Taliban seized power in Afghanistan on August 15th, most countries closed down their diplomatic missions in Kabul and started evacuating their citizens out of Afghanistan. But there are 4 notable exceptions. Pakistan, Russia, Iran, and China decided to stay put. And now China has emerged as one of the first nations to develop diplomatic channels with the Taliban.
It's unfortunate because the NATO and American presence there was able to maintain a more balanced government, and even with the assumption that the Taliban would be involved, but this takeover of the entire country and the surrender by the U.S., which which also caused a surrender by the NATO forces, or the withdrawal, I should say. Yes, so it's caused this opportunity for China and Afghanistan or the Taliban to cozy up together. Now we have this unfortunate marriage, friends with benefits, between the Chinese and the Taliban.
On the 28th of July, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met Taliban's co-founder Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar in North China's Tianjin. Before this meeting, the Taliban had declared that it sees China as a friend of Afghanistan. It had also assured Beijing that it would not host Uyghur Islamic militants from the volatile Xinjiang province, which is a major worry for the Chinese government. And just after the collapse of Kabul, this statement shed light on China's intentions.
We encourage and hope that the Afghan Taliban will follow through on their positive statements, unite with all parties and ethnic groups in Afghanistan, and soon establish a broad and inclusive political structure that is in line with Afghanistan's own national conditions and is supported by the people through dialogue and consultation.
Beijing's soft corner for the Taliban was also evident on August 24th, when G7 nations held a virtual meeting over the Afghanistan crisis. China and Russia are not part of the G7, an informal group of 7 countries that includes the United States and the United Kingdom. A day later, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin exchanged views on Afghanistan over the phone. In the call with Putin, Xi reiterated China's position of non-interference and of respecting Afghanistan's sovereignty and independence. The report said Putin told Xi he shares China's position and interests in Afghanistan, and he is willing to work with China to prevent foreign forces from entering and destroying Afghanistan. Xi urged all parties in Afghanistan to build an open and inclusive political framework, implement moderate, stable policies, and cut ties with all terrorist groups. Interestingly, while Russia officially recognizes the Taliban as a terrorist organization, Moscow has praised the Taliban for restoring order following its takeover of the country. Putin had earlier raised his concerns regarding the situation in Afghanistan, warning that a collapse in the security situation could see terrorists entering neighboring states under the guise of refugees.
There was a resolution in Afghanistan, the UN Security Council, which basically had 2 aspects. One was, of course, to allow freedom of movement to people who wish to leave, and second, that Taliban should not allow its territory to be used by other terror groups. And surprisingly, while both Russia and China have been very worried about this aspect, they refrained from voting. They abstained. They did not oppose as permanent fight. They could have opposed it, but they did not refrain. So I have still not been able to figure out why this duality in their policy, because it was the UN Security Council's resolution was really asking them what these countries have been individually engaging Taliban and getting assurances for. So why not through the UN Security Council? So we will have to see how the situation evolves.
Moscow is keen to ensure that the instability in Afghanistan does not spill over into Central Asia, and has been calling on the West to accept the reality of the Taliban's victory. On the other hand, China is on a quest to please the Taliban so that it can clinch lucrative projects to exploit the mineral-rich nation.
We all know about China that they are interested in economic investment in different countries, and Afghanistan is one of the countries close to them, so why wouldn't they look into Afghanistan with that possibility? I think it's not only the mining sector, it's different sectors that they're looking into possibilities of investing. If you're coming up and you're signing the concession that we signed previously with the Chinese, which was for the INEC copper, if you come with the same condition, then basically Afghan people will not benefit anything from that. Literally everything will go, including the employment. Everything will be in the benefit of the Chinese. So they do look into that possibility. We know that they are famous for that, and that is their strategy. But all very much depends on other states. In our case, states of Afghanistan, which is now managed by the Taliban, that they make sure that whatever concession they are giving to Chinese on other country, they make sure that it's a win-win situation. So it should not be total win for the investor and total lose for the Afghan people and the government.
China, it's not that it's something very new. What people don't know that the Chinese were involved in Afghan situation right from the time of the Soviet invasion. Of course, at that point in time, China and USSR were not on the same page. But China was then clandestinely supporting and arming the Mujahideen for a defeat of the Soviets. That had stopped after the Soviet withdrew. But then their own close coordination with Pakistan had continued. And the fact that they have a privileged relationship with Pakistan also gave them access to the Taliban leadership, which is all based in Pakistan, with Peshawar or Quetta or whatever. So they had a privileged access, so that helped them.
Rare earth metals in Afghanistan were estimated to be worth anywhere between $1 trillion to $3 trillion. In 2008, China signed a 30-year contract with the Afghan government to access the world's second largest untapped copper deposit at Mes Aynak, which happens to lie underneath the ruins of an ancient Buddhist city. The project was stalled due to security concerns. In 2016, the Taliban said they are giving China the green light to restart the $3 billion mining project, but not much progress has been made. Afghanistan is now on the brink of an economic collapse, and this is where China will play the benefactor card.
The Taliban and the current government of Afghanistan, which is still being formed, will benefit greatly from the CCP and the Chinese presence. Economically, first of all, they need aid. They were obviously dependent on Western aid, especially American aid, prior to just a few days ago. And so, with the Taliban takeover, that's jeopardized a lot of the significant, or basically all of the aid they were receiving, at least for now. So I think if the Chinese are supporting the Taliban directly, there will be some economic benefit. And I think that they desperately need, government employees haven't been paid for several months in Afghanistan. They're not going to be able to run the country without some sort of economic support, and it will likely come from China and the CCP.
A lot of people will note that Afghanistan hasn't been a signatory to BRI. It doesn't really have to be a signatory to BRI, and that's because China is the single largest investor in Afghanistan. So it doesn't have to be a signatory. China is doing what it wants, and Afghans will be very happy to share the payouts.
In order to understand the role of Afghanistan for China's Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, it is important to know who the key players are. The Belt and Road Initiative is a global infrastructure development strategy that was adopted by Chinese Premier Xi Jinping in 2013. To invest in nearly 70 countries and international organizations. It's been inspired by the concept of the 2,000-year-old Silk Road established during the Han Dynasty. The ancient network of trade routes connected China to the Mediterranean via Eurasia for centuries. The modern route was initially announced with the purpose of restoring the ancient one, but it has expanded across multiple countries, spread across the continents of Asia, Africa, and Europe via land and maritime networks with 6 economic corridors. With this ambitious project, China aims to stabilize its underdeveloped western peripheries and rekindle its economy. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is an important component of this initiative, but it faces many hindrances.
Everything today that China builds infrastructure, it automatically puts it in the BRI box, but that is a narrative building rather than infrastructure. In this region, but they have, outside of Pakistan, they have been looking at other options, including talking to Iran, trying to get access to Chabahar port, which would be an alternative to Gwadar. Gwadar, I think the Chinese realize that it has a problem at both ends. At the entry point into Pakistan, it runs through a disputed territory with India, and that is why India has rightly opposed it. At the exit point in Gwadar is a very restive province of Balochistan, which itself is at war with Pakistan. And they feel that Pakistanis are in illegal occupation of Balochistan, and there's a freedom movement. And you would have heard about the attacks that have happened in Balochistan, including targeting Chinese engineers. One happened only last week. So that is the problem. Chinese also realize that Pakistan, because of the turmoil in that society, because of the existence of terror groups, it is always a risky proposition. The Chinese like to have alternates. The other alternate that they are looking at is running through Central Asia into Iran. Now, of course, Afghanistan comes in between because of the geography. So if they would want a stable Afghanistan so that they could sort of integrate this region in their overall infrastructure development projects and reach Gwadar, which will also it serves the same purpose of reaching the Gulf through a land route.
This is one of the reasons why Beijing does not want to upset the Taliban. China has shelled out large loans to countries like Afghanistan and Pakistan to secure its BRI dream. Pakistan has been a major beneficiary of Chinese investments, but things went haywire on the 14th of July this year. Bomb blast on the Chinese shuttle bus in northern Pakistan killed 13 people, including 9 Chinese engineers. All of them were working on the $4 billion Dasu hydroelectric dam. This project is part of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, a $65 billion investment plan that aims to connect western China to the Gwadar seaport in southern Pakistan. A month after the blast, Pakistan blamed Pakistani Taliban militants, known as Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, for the attack, claiming that it was plotted on Afghan soil. This is the same group that carried out the 2014 Peshawar school attack that killed more than 130 children.
China has already requested that Pakistan look into the truth, arrest the perpetrators and punish them severely, and earnestly protect the safety of Chinese nationals, organizations and projects in Pakistan.
In the past, Pakistani Taliban also killed and kidnapped several Chinese nationals in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan. While China is Pakistan's great economic hope, Pakistan is the battleground for China's encounters with Islamic militancy. Formed in 2007, Pakistani Taliban draws inspiration from the Afghan Taliban, and yet Beijing appears to be trusting the new holders of Kabul.
Obviously, the Pakistani Taliban and the Afghanistan Taliban are pretty much the same. They operate in the tribals in the same region. You had support for the Taliban in Afghanistan from the Pakistani military and security services. So I see them, as really as one. And I think that the sensitivities between India and China and Pakistan right now are delicate. And I think all the more reason why this vacuum that's occurred in Afghanistan is important to the CCP be, and I think they're being aggressive about it. I mean, you also hear about the rare earth mineral deposits in Afghanistan, but I don't take that as quite as seriously because that's much more of a long-term issue. Yes, it's relevant because most rare earth minerals, come from China. In the global market right now, and that should be something that we should worry about long term, or it could be an issue. But that takes years to develop, and I think it's more the security issues and the possibilities of jihad operating out of Afghanistan. I think that's really what's worrying the Chinese right now.
China has been accused of committing crimes against humanity and possibly genocide against its Uyghur population in the northwestern region of Xinjiang, which is home to about 12 million Uyghurs. Most Uyghurs are Sunni Muslims, and their faith has put them at odds with the Chinese Communist Party. It is estimated that China has detained more than 1 million Uyghurs against their will since 2017 in a large network of mass detention camps. After the Taliban takeover, as many as 2,000 ethnic Uyghurs living in Afghanistan have been placed in jeopardy. They fear being deported to the internment camps in China. These are the same camps where many militants from the East Turkestan Islamic Movement, or ETIM, are also detained. ETIM's stated objective is to form a sovereign nation of East Turkestan, carved out from the Xinjiang province, and China holds ETIM responsible for hundreds of terrorist attacks. China is desperate to ensure that Uyghur militants do not receive support from the Taliban.
In the past, maybe 10 or 20 years, I think the CCP liked the U.S. being in Afghanistan. It was a distraction. Now they have to worry about jihad next door. In the last few years, you saw a lot of criticism from the West about the 1 million Uyghurs in so-called education camps or in concentration camps, but not much from the Muslim community. You didn't really hear much about it from the Arabs and the Persian community in Iran. But I think it's different now because you have, an Eastern Turkic population of Muslims that are in camps, and now you have Afghanistan, which is ripe for jihadists to gather and operate with some protection by the Taliban. And I think that's worrisome to have next door to China.
So China is very conscious of this, but China is trying to utilize its ties with Pakistan, and I think trying to work with Pakistan and independently with the Taliban to try and ensure that the ETIM will be, will be controlled. The East Turkestan Islamic Movement, which of course is fighting for freedom and rights of Muslims, the Uyghur Muslims of Xinjiang. But this is going to be a very difficult task, because if China thinks that you can just separate and the Taliban will control the ETIM without controlling the other groups, that is again impossible. And China runs the risk of just stepping in where the United States has left, and this becoming another bear trap for itself.
Large number of Uyghurs who went to Syria to fight with the Islamic State, and they also may come back, and that will swell the numbers very close to the Chinese border. And that is why their concern is high. Now, whether Taliban will be able to control them, neutralize them, expel them, I don't know. Because I have really not figured out what is it that the Taliban will do more than the previous governments, democratic governments, which were already doing. And I say this because I lived there and I saw how the cooperation was. So on the general treatment of Muslims, the Chinese, I think, are at a loss. They don't know how to do it.
Afghanistan is a notoriously difficult country to govern. It's called the graveyard of empires. In the last 40 years, it has witnessed 2 wars with 2 superpowers. One war created the Taliban, the other helped them return to power. And now China is rushing in to fill the vacuum created in Afghanistan. But can it really expect the Taliban to play by Beijing's rules?
At some point, the Chinese will burn their fingers and recoil and, take discretion as the better part of valor. But they will nevertheless have positioned themselves much better for the future and in playing the longer game that China is much better at than the United States.
Well, China and Taliban together will always be mediated by Pakistan. And we may see the new chapter, of the bear trap. This time it will be called the dragon trap.